Picture this, an emperor, the most powerful man in Europe, the guy whose signature could start wars, end them, and redraw the map of a continent. Now picture him writing a letter to a banker, a private citizen, and basically begging. The banker's response was polite, firm, but absolutely devastating. He reminded the emperor, in writing, that he had personally paid for his rise to power, and that without him, that crown would be sitting on someone else's head. That banker was Jakob Fugger, and if you have never heard that name, stick around, because that is exactly what we are fixing today. Jakob Fugger was born in 1459 in Augsburg, Germany. His father was a weaver. Comfortable, but nowhere near the wealth Jacob would eventually build. Jacob was the 10th of 11 children. 10th. Not exactly first in line for anything. He was originally sent to a monastery to become a priest. But fate, and better career options, had other plans. By his teens, he was working in the family's trading operation in Venice. And this is where everything changed. Venice in the 1470s was the financial capital of the world. The place where the smartest merchants on the planet were figuring out how money actually worked. How to track it, move it, lend it, and make it grow. Jacob soaked up all of it. He came back to Augsburg a different person, not just a trader, a man who understood that the real product was not cloth or spice, it was money itself. And yes, I know that sounds like something someone says at a TED Talk right before they try to sell you a crypto course. But in Jacob's case, it was just true. Here's where Fugger made his first historic move. In the late 1480s, he started lending money to the Habsburgs, the royal family that basically ran Central Europe. They needed cash for wars, politics, and the endless expensive business of being royal. Jacob had cash. They had something he wanted in return: mining rights, copper and silver mines in Tyrol and Hungary. Fugger did not just get access to the mines, he took over the whole chain, digging it up, processing it, and selling it across Europe. He locked down the European copper market at a time when copper was in everything. Coins, cannons, ships. If you needed metal, you needed Fugger. He could set the price of the stuff that made every coin in your pocket and every weapon in your army. That is not wealth, that is control. By the early 1500s, his firm was operating across Europe with offices in Antwerp, Rome, Lisbon, and Krakow. Historians sometimes call it the first true multinational company. And Fugger built it in the 1500s, without email, without phones, and without a single spreadsheet. Now we get to the part that sounds like fiction. In 1519, the Holy Roman Emperor died. Picking his replacement triggered one of the biggest power struggles in European history. 7 princes had the right to vote for the next emperor. 2 candidates were fighting for it: Charles of Habsburg and Francis I of France. This was not a fair election. It was an auction. The princes expected to be paid, generously, for their votes. Charles needed around 850,000 gold florins. To put that in terms that land, that was roughly the entire yearly income of the English crown at the time. He did not have it. His own treasury could not cover it. So he went to Jakob Fugger. Fugger put together a group of lenders, but he personally covered the biggest share, more than half. He essentially bought the election of the most powerful leader in the Western world. And he knew exactly what he had done. He kept the receipts. Literally. When Charles later tried to dodge the debt, Fugger wrote him a letter, which still exists, and which is one of the most extraordinary documents in financial history. In it, he reminded the emperor that it was a well-known fact that His Majesty could not have gained the crown without Fugger's help. A private citizen, writing to the Holy Roman Emperor, basically saying, "I made you," in 1523, with full confidence. If Jakob Fugger were alive today, he would be absolutely insufferable on LinkedIn, and I mean that as a compliment. Now, let's talk about how rich this man actually was. At his peak, Fugger's personal wealth was roughly 2% of all European economic output. To put that in perspective, Rockefeller at his height held about 1.5% of American GDP. Historian Greg Steinmetz, who wrote the main English language biography of Fugger, argues that no one before or since has controlled such a large share of the economy. Not Rockefeller, Carnegie, or Vanderbilt. Some historians have tried to convert his wealth into today's money and landed somewhere in the hundreds of billions of dollars, though those comparisons are rough at best. What is less rough is the relative picture. For the time he lived in, nobody came close. And yet, almost nobody knows his name. The Medici get the movies. The Rothschilds get the documentaries. Fugger gets a footnote in a textbook that nobody outside of graduate school reads. If you're the type of person who finds that annoying, welcome. You are in the right place. And if you find this story interesting and almost unbelievable, wait until you see the next one. This is the exact work we do in this channel. Subscribe so you can follow us on the ride. Things only get wilder from here. And now here's the part most retellings skip. Fugger had the receipts. He had the leverage. But getting your money back from a king is not like getting it back from a business partner. The Habsburgs owed him enormous amounts and were always late. The kings and princes he had financed dragged their feet, and some never paid in full. Fugger spent his later years writing increasingly frustrated letters demanding payment. He lobbied. He threatened to cut off future lending. He largely did not get paid on time. This matters because it is a lesson that every lender in every century since has had to learn the hard way. The person who owes you money might also be the person who controls the courts. A crown does not make someone a reliable borrower. It often makes them worse, because who's gonna force a king to pay? He died in 1525, still one of the wealthiest people alive, but with a huge chunk of his fortune tied up in royal debts his heirs would spend decades chasing. Sometimes you do everything right. You build something extraordinary. And the most powerful man in Europe still does not pay you back on time. That is finance, even at the highest level. Jakob Fugger built the first multinational, controlled the copper market, bought an imperial election, and wrote the most audacious letter in financial history. He did most of these before the printing press had been around for 50 years. He was the proof that capital, placed in the right hands at the right moment, can move kings. That idea never went away, it just changed address. The modern lobbying firms, campaign donors expecting a favor, and sovereign debt negotiations between a powerful nation and the banks it borrowed from that we have today are a direct offspring of Fugger's world. We are still living in it. That alone should tell you about how powerful and revolutionary the man was.